I wish the best of luck to the new CASA board members, Anita Taylor, Murray Warfield and Ian Smith, just as I welcome the appointment of former Air Vice Marshal Mark Skidmore to the position of Director of Aviation Safety. I do want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to John McCormack. John McCormack did an outstanding job. He was someone who was recruited after an international search for the best person. He brought decades of experience, not just in the Australian aviation industry, but particularly in Hong Kong for Cathay and in the international sector. And he, I think, provided a rigour that was needed at the time. The decision to ground an RPT service for the first and hopefully the last time in Australia's history, when John McCormack made the decision to ground Tiger, was not only a courageous step, but one that was entirely appropriate and needed. And when Mr McCormack advised me of the decision, and I remember speaking to Prime Minister Gillard and informing her of what was about to occur, because by definition you can't make a decision that an airline is unsafe and say we'll ground them in a couple of days' time. What it meant by definition was that people got stranded. There was a real world impact of the travelling public, particularly given the nature of Tiger. Many families who are able to travel for the first time because it is a budget airline, and that was a courageous decision by John McCormack. I think the fact that Tiger have now been taken over by Virgin Australia and are now functioning in a way that satisfies all of the safety concerns shows that that was not just a courageous decision but a correct decision. In the report, the panel expressed concern about relations between the industry and the regulator. It said this: in recent years, the regulator has adopted an across-the-board hardline philosophy, which in the panel's view is not appropriate for an advanced aviation nation such as Australia. As a result, relationships between industry and CASA have in many cases become adversarial. It went on to recommend a new strategic direction for CASA, calling for a more, and I quote, collaborative relationship based on mutual trust and respect, end quote. It is here that I would respectfully to the Minister very much sound a note of caution. I certainly agree that it's important for a regulated industry like aviation to have constructive and respectful relations between the regulator and the industry. But I would be very concerned if the relationship between CASA and aviation operators became too close. And I expressed this concern with David Forsyth, who the Minister, and I thank him for this, ensured gave me a verbal review as well, and we were able to have very much a constructive discussion about it. And if I could express some caution, that by definition, I think a regulator must have a bit of tension with those people who it is regulating, particularly in aviation, where, of course, a bit like the term train spotters is pretty familiar to people. In aviation, there are plane spotters, and they think that they know best, and they do not want to be told by any regulator that they don't know how to keep their plane safe. But the truth is, Madam Speaker, that the incidents that have occurred in this country have occurred on smaller, particularly the small planes that have incidents on all too regular occurrences. And I think one of the worst jobs of being the aviation minister in this country is the fact that you get notified in real time. People, except for the minister, probably aren't aware of that. I have had phone calls at all hours telling me that a plane has gone missing with 2 or 3 people on board. It's one of the real things that when the departmental head rings, or in the case of Mr McCormick, often had that direct contact, you really didn't want to receive that call. So if I could sound that cautious note as I expressed to David Forsyth, the customers are not the people who own the planes. The customers of CASA and aviation safety are the people who are on the planes and the people who would be impacted if there were an incident. Madam Speaker, planes fly over my house on far too regular intervals. If there were an incident in the most densely populated area of Australia, my electorate is the second smallest geographically. Wentworth is the smallest. The areas have highly dense populations. If there were an incident, it would have an impact not just for people on the planes, but for people in the vicinity of an airport. So if I could express that concern, that we must never sacrifice rigour for harmony. I agree with the Minister that the actions of the regulator must be firm and they must also be fair. But the Minister has a responsibility to hold the line against industry pressure. We must maintain the necessary tension between the regulator and the regulated to keep all parties on their toes. If they're on their toes, then they are focused on what matters, safety of the travelling public. If they are allowed to operate too closely and without appropriate distance, the public would be the loser. So, while doing all we can to promote professional dealings among all participants in the industry, our overriding responsibility is to make accident prevention and proper safety standards our primary concern. All other concerns must be further down the ladder. And I note the Minister's comment that he is considering asking the ATSB to reopen the investigation into the Pelair incident of 2009. This follows the findings this week of the delayed report that I commissioned as the Minister and that was conducted by the Canadian Transport Safety Board. I note that the TSB found the ATSB investigation methods were best practice, but I'm certainly welcome, along as I've previously said, the principle that if there's any doubt at all, there is a need to take that precautionary principle into concern. I am concerned that the government has required aviation operators to cut about $12 million from the costs of aviation operators as part of its push to reduce so-called red tape. I also note that the government has made a similar demand of the Australian Maritime Safety Authority. You can't have organisations like CASA and AMSA that perform such an extraordinarily important role in this country and continue to put pressure on them to cut costs. AMSA provide, as we've seen with the issue of the Malaysian Airlines search and rescue, a critical role to play. AMSA look after around about 1/3 of the world's surface. So it is absolutely critical, and I do believe that there's a real case for a quarantining from cuts of aviation safety. I conclude, Madam Speaker, by indicating publicly, as I have privately, to the Minister that the opposition is firmly committed to working in a constructive and bipartisan way on these issues. I note that the Minister has been exemplary in ensuring appropriate briefings and ensuring that this issue continues to be where it was when I was the Minister and previously under the Howard government. It's absolutely critical that we deal with this. Now, given the short period that the opposition has had the government's response to the report, it's not for today to comment specifically on the government's response to each of the 37 recommendations. So I indicate to the Minister that should there be any concerns, then I will express them to him directly, because obviously we just received the response to the report. I note that the government has accepted in whole or part all of these recommendations with one exception, but we reserve our right to further comment on those matters based upon a proper, closer analysis and proper advice. But I want to indicate that that shouldn't be seen in any way as a suggestion that we will operate politically on this issue, because we won't. And we will deal with these things on their merits. And I thank the Minister for his response, and I conclude where I began. It's good to see him back in the House.